So it's in that context that I think, one can worry about the status of Palestinian life as recognizable or as grievable. And of course, if a given life is understood as, by definition, an attack on your own life, then that life is no longer a life, but an instrument of death. And so if you kill the instrument of death, you do it in the name of life, and there's no mourning, right? And I think we saw a kind of very complicated working of that logic in the context of Gaza not so long ago. So that's one issue that I think actually preoccupied me also in my work on Antigone. And of course, Antigone's claim was that she wanted to bury her brother in public. And she was prohibited by Creon from doing precisely that. And public grieving became really very incendiary. It did even in Plato's Republic. I don't know if you remember, but one reason he wanted to ban the poets is that he was afraid that people would just start grieving voluptuously, that they would start grieving without control, that they would be given over, they would fatten, he said they would fatten on grief, that they would become overwhelmed with grief, and that the polis would come down. And there's something powerful about open public mourning, and there's something even politically contestatory about it. And I think that perhaps in this way, my concern about who counts as real, as early as gender trouble, or whose lives are grievable in Antigone's claim, or precarious life, or even in my most recent work, Frames of War, which just came out. I think this is the problematic that I'm working on time and again. So, I'm sorry.
I was just wondering, culturally, if you saw sort of a trend where people don't want to mourn, that they almost go out of it because for some reason it's almost a confrontation that's too much with reality, or would really force them to confront things within themselves that they'd rather sort of suppress.
Well, I'm sure. I mean, I think that there are certain kinds of mourning without end that can finally be debilitating, and I think there's no doubt about that. And I think I've been drawn to Freud's little essay on mourning and melancholia time and again as a way of trying to think about under what conditions can we openly avow a set of losses, and under what conditions do we disavow a set of losses. And the disavowal of loss, which is typical of melancholia, is also, even for Freud, somewhat functional. In fact, he comes to think that, well, that's actually part of subject formation. It's an inevitable part. We can never fully or openly grieve all losses.
I guess I was thinking about it more sort of in regard to like Klein and sort of people who fail to experience mourning, and how it sort of comes what she calls like a detriment to their personality.
Yes.
And I was just wondering that fear more than what you were just speaking
I see. I'm sorry. I reversed your concern. Yes, and Klein, of course, builds on Freud's mourning and melancholia. She's thinking about manic depression, for instance, as part of a melancholic problem. And yes, obviously there are all kinds of states of suffering that have been emerged from that. No question. Yeah.
I just had something. I don't know. This is probably me misreading, but when you were talking just a second ago about public mourning having a politically contestatory dimension to it, I immediately then flashed back to when you were talking about the inappropriateness of the instrumentalization of mourning in relation to the Holocaust or political ends. And I'm wondering if there's a problematic or disjunction with any kind of publicness of mourning as a instrumentalization of loss.
Well, I think we have to ask whether the instrumentalization of the Holocaust is actually an instrumentalization of mourning. I mean, Edith Zertal says it's a refusal to mourn, right? That it actually displaces mourning. Okay, that the nation building commemoration and repetition is not the same as the practice of mourning. So it's not the instrumentalization of mourning, it's the instrumentalization of certain forms of commemoration. And I think there are other people, I was talking to one of you about this earlier, David Simpson, for instance, wrote a book on commemoration after 9/11, in which he talks about, how certain kinds of hyperbolic forms of public mourning, or what appears like mourning, actually not only disavow the loss, but get instrumentalized for certain kinds of military and national policy purposes. So that's always a question. I think that's always something to be alert to, how that works. And when and where commemoration gets instrumentalized for another purpose, does it fail to mourn? Does it depart from the task of mourning? I don't know. It's an open question. Anyway, so let me just tell you this story because I've been promising it and hours late, and I think you should be amused by something. And it does have to do with somebody who thinks that I don't think they're real. Okay, who wants a recognition of reality. And it's actually linked, I think, to this very problematic. So, and let me start this way. I remember I was called by the San Francisco Chronicle a couple of years ago by a reporter, and she wanted to do a special article on trans men. Okay, so apparently biological women who become men and who understand themselves not as men but as trans men, and who keep the trans linked to their understanding of self. So that's the nomenclature they use, trans men. And she's worried because she thinks there's a flood of former women who are usually lesbians, usually butch, who are becoming trans men. And pretty soon there won't be any women left, or there won't be any butches left, and the femmes will be in trouble, or I don't know. Anyway, so I'm not exactly sure what she was so worried about, but she was very worried. And she said, look, aren't they just denying or repudiating their femininity? Or aren't they women hating? Oh my God, it's the same thing. It's like, oh, you must be a self-hating Jew. Oh, you must hate yourself as a woman. Okay, here we go. They must be woman-hating, or they must be conforming to misogynist norms, or idealizing masculinity at the expense of femininity, and that's why they want to become men, because it's just easier in the world to become men and you get paid more. Okay, so I tried gently to persuade this reporter to consider that the desire to transition might come out of positive desires, and that it's not necessarily rooted in the repudiation of the former one, which is also why one keeps the trans, right? It's like, yes, I was, but this is my story, this is my transition. So you don't pretend that there was no transition, you actually acknowledge the transition in the prefix trans. And I said that I didn't think a logic of non-contradiction always pertained in these matters. What a person wants is not always to be understood in terms of what a person rejects, right? Otherwise, if you're heterosexual, that must be that you've just repressed your homosexuality, or if you're, how do you say it? Okay, or if you're homosexual, that must be because you've repressed your heterosexuality, or if you're a man, hey, you must be repressing your femininity, or if you're a woman, you've got real issues with your masculinity, right? So that kind of assumption that there's always a repudiation that's at the basis of any term that you claim seems to me to be involved in a serious logjam of a sort. The idea that an openly trans man somehow is participating only in masculine privilege is, of course, very funny when you consider, it's not funny, but it's actually tragic when you consider how often trans people are at risk of discrimination, loss of employment, being disowned by their families, public harassment, violence, etc.